Hey guys, my name's Austin Shaner and welcome back to my channel. It has been a hot minute since we last talked. I think it was like end of December or so when I made the last video, and I don't know if you've watched the other video I had posted since kind of explaining the delay, but long story short, my wife and I got pregnant at the end of December, and that really kind of derailed my endeavor in this project. And so I also had to make a changing table slash dresser for our new baby, and I have now completed that. As you can see on the screen here, I think it turned out amazing, and I'm really excited and happy about it. But that's not what you guys came here for. You guys came here to see the next series of how to build a guitar in Fusion 360. So let's go ahead and get started. Last time we left off with how to lay out your fretboard schematic, which gave you a grid that you could base your design off of. We went over how to draw a basic headstock and some of the little tricks you can use to help you design that quickly and make that easier to modify going into the future. And we also kind of rushed through how to design a guitar body, just from a 2D profile. And the whole point of that was that we wanted to get the 2D outline of our guitar in place. And we were then going to use those foundational sketches to create 3D objects going forward. And so what I'd really like to do is I'd like to mold the body a little bit today. Now, I'm not going to go too far into the body because you kind of need to do this in a little bit of a sequence. So if you were to, let's say, fully model the body all the way till the very end, you might realize that the way you modeled that actually doesn't allow you to model the neck the way you want. And so really what you actually want to do is just get enough of the body in place so that way you can model the neck. And then once the neck is modeled and all of your geometry that's connecting it to the body is in place, then you can come in and do all of your like ergonomic reliefs and stylistic choices on the body. I hope that makes sense. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and do our first extrusion. So what we want to do is we want to come up to extrude, and then we want to select the body and this neck pocket. If you're having trouble selecting that because it wants to toggle between the fretboard and that neck cavity, you can just unselect the fretboard, and that makes it easier to select. And so we want to go ahead and extrude that, the thickness, the total thickness that we want the body to be. So whether you want the whole body to be 1 inch thick, or 2 inches thick if you really want a thick guitar, or I usually go about 1.5 inches thick. That seems to be pretty common in the industry. It seems to be a pretty comfortable thickness to play. And so I just go ahead and extrude it 1.5 inches. So type 1.5, hit enter, and now we've got our first extrusion. So it was as simple as that. So now we've got our first 3D object. So what we want to do now is immediately get the neck pocket in place. So let's go ahead and hide the fretboard sketch, and let's say, okay, I want this pocket, and we want to extrude that down. Now here's a bit of a tricky spot already in designing the guitar, is how deep should that neck pocket be? That really depends on the bridge that you're going to be using. So if you're using like a standard like flat like hip shot bridge or something, it's pretty typical to have like a 5/8 depth neck pocket. That is going to make your fretboard sit a little bit higher. If you plan on recessing your bridge down into the body a little bit to get a bit of a lower action, you might want to go a little bit deeper with the neck pocket. Or if you're using like a Gibson style bridge, you might need to go actually quite a bit higher. So what we can do is just, I like to do 5/8 to start with. And then if I need to adjust that later, I can always come back and adjust that. So 5/8, we extrude that into the body, and now we've got our cutout. So if we hide all of our sketches, we've got the real rough outline. So you can imagine if you were to actually build this, you could just take like a bandsaw or a router template or something and cut this out, and this is basically what you'd be left with. So now we've reached really the second major decision that we need to make with this guitar. The first one was the neck pocket. based kind of off the bridge that we'd like to use, if you hopefully have an idea of which bridge you like to use. But the second is, do we want to have a simple filleted style guitar, or do we want to have more of an ergonomic, more organic shape to it? Now, in the former, if you want to have a simple filleted style guitar, let me first explain what fillet means, because some of you who are CAD modeling or new to CAD modeling may not be that familiar with it. If you're more familiar with, like, let's say woodworking terms, it's like a roundover. So what you can see here in this image is it just puts a radius on all edges or corners that you select. So if I hit fillet, for example, and I select all the edges that don't touch my neck pocket, that's really important. Actually, you can do it on this one, but you don't want to do it on the back one. So if I select all these edges, let's say here, like that, and yep, and that one, we can apply like a 1/4 inch roundover or fillet. Now what that does obviously is it just applies a radius around the corner. It softens all those edges so it's more comfortable to play. It's not square, doesn't have any sharp edges to it. You can actually do that at this point, contrary to what I said at the beginning. Where it gets a little tricky is depending on what you want to do with the neck. So if you want to go ahead and have just a fillet on the neck, like so, like if you'd like to just have a fillet on the neck like that, which is pretty common across bolt-on necks, you can just do that now. However, if you want to have like more of a unibody style where it's like got a nice smooth transition between the neck and the body, you're going to want to save at least this back edge right here until later. You probably could get away with doing everything else other than that. But what's really nice about saving that edge for later is, depending on how you want to model that pocket, or not pocket, that relief, you could actually do one sweeping loft or cut through both the neck and the body at the same time to guarantee that they are perfectly tangent or flush with each other. And that's what I believe, if I remember right, that I did on this one at first, and then I came back and decided that no, I want a little bit more of an edge there. And it ended up turning out really well for me doing it this way. But at one point I had it completely, like the transition from here to here was straight. There was no, vertical step. So why did I just go through and explain that? Well, the simple radius / filleted or roundover version like we were talking about, that's really simple. That's a very easy way to produce a good looking guitar if you've already got the 2D outline, and that gets you a good portion of the way through the design right there. Where people really get stuck in Fusion 360 or CAD modeling in general, because it's a difficult concept, is when you have to introduce lofts or sweeps. And really that's the reason why I wanted to make this video, or this video series to begin with, is because once you start delving into that area, you can produce amazing designs, but you have to have a really good foundation of how those tools work in order to be happy with actually using them. Because anybody who's tried lofting before knows that it can be infuriating sometimes. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of a step back from designing the body, and I'm going to show you guys some of the core principles of how sweeps and lofts work. And then we're going to go ahead and then apply that knowledge to the body. So I'm going to go ahead and open a new design, and let's talk about lofts. So go ahead and create a sketch on any plane that you'd like, and let's go ahead and draw a square. So I'll go to rectangle, center point rectangle, and let's make these equal. So let's do 1.5 inches. Grab that line. I want that line equal to that line, and hit finish. So a standard extrusion, like we did on the body, would take whatever profile you want and extend it to the length that you tell it to. Where lofts really start to differ is it extrudes between two shapes, and those shapes can be different than each other. So I'm not just extruding between one square at this point and another square, 3 inches above that. I'm extruding between two different shapes. And in order to do that, you have to have a shape on a different plane. So if we open up the origin point here, these are our planes. We've got our X, Y, and Z, or also like top, front, left plane, for example. What if I say I want a plane that's like the top one, but 3 inches up from here? So let's go ahead and hit offset plane. So you go to construct, offset plane. We can select either this sketch or this reference plane here. And we can say we want that to be 3 inches above that. So now, not only do I have a plane down here, I've also got the same plane, but 3 inches offset from this one. So now what I can do is go ahead and sketch on that plane. And let's say we want a circle. We want a circle, and let's say we want that to be 1 inch. Go ahead and hit finish. So now, not only do we have a square down below, we have a circle 3 inches up. So what a loft lets you do, if you just do a really basic simple loft, you can come up here, instead of hitting extrude, you can go create loft. And the order here matters. So you always want to start at one point and end on the other. You don't want to select things in between. So for example, if you've got a square here, a triangle here, and a circle here, you'd want to select them in that order, or vice versa, circle, triangle, square. You wouldn't want to go triangle to circle to square, because it's going to try to loft all the way around. So if I just hit square and circle, you can see what it's trying to do. So it's trying to create a circle out of a square. And it tries to find the mathematically easiest way to do that, right? So it's taking these 4 points from my start location and drawing them to 4 points, just kind of arbitrarily decided but equidistant from each other on this circle. Now, because there's no constraints, I can actually grab those and move those around, right? So there's nothing locking that into place. So if I move that over here, you can see that that looks quite different than this side. And so I can drag this one over to here, and now we've got a flat spot. Whereas on the other one, see, this one we had a flat, this one we have a curve. So that's where it gets a little tricky with lofts. So you can actually constrain how the loft interacts between those two shapes. And to do that, essentially, what we're going to be doing is taking these lines right here, and we're just going to draw them ourselves. So we're going to go ahead and preemptively draw those lines and force that square to follow that shape. So if I go and hit cancel, I need to draw a line from this corner up to that circle, and one from this corner to that circle, this corner to that circle, that corner to that circle as well. So the easiest way to do that is you can go construct plane at angle or offset plane, however you want to do this. And you can do tangent plane if you're drawing on the outside of a circle or a sphere or a cylinder or something. You can go plane at angle, and let's say we want that to be 90 degrees up from there. So we're drawing a plane between these 2 points. If I hit OK, now I can sketch on that plane. So now let me go ahead and sketch on that plane. And now we can actually bring in, just like the in the schematic example from the previous episode, we can bring in the dimensions from these previous sketches so we have something to lock onto. So what I can do is I can, let's say, click this outside point and this outside point, hit P on my keyboard to project, and we can project that into this sketch plane. So what I can then do is also grab the circle. Since there's no points to grab on that, I can just grab the whole circle and hit P for project, hit enter, and it will take what you actually see right here and project that onto your sketch. So if I hide the other two sketches, it's only bringing in what is visible from that plane. And so now I have 2 points that I can connect. So for example, I can do an arc, let's say from here to here, or I could do, let's say, another arc, but I could go, let's say, the opposite direction. And if I go ahead and hit finish, now normally you'd give these dimensions, But if I hit finish and I go ahead and re-loft this, and I say I want to go from this square to this circle, it's going to try to do the automatic version first. And then you have right here what's called rails or guide type. The regular rails means you're connecting any point on your sketch to another point on the other sketch. And that can be any point you want. So it could be this one to that one, or this one to that one. It doesn't matter. Centerline sketch takes the, not necessarily the origin point, but the center of that sketch, and I connect those two. So I could draw a line from here, you know, up to that line, and it would make the whole square follow that as well. But we're going to use regular guide rails for now. And let's go ahead and select guide rail, add guide rail, select that one. And you can see it's already making it follow that curve. And let's say, well, I want this one to come out more, so let's select this other one. And let's go ahead and hit OK. So now what it's doing is it's taking that square, and these other two, or these two that we just drew sketch lines for, are following those curves precisely. So if I look at my sketch, you can see that the profile of that extrusion is following that. But if I look at the other side, from this angle, it's still that perfect shape. But what you don't see is everything else had to morph along with it in order to keep its relative location to each other. So that's roughly how lofts work. Now, something that really gets tricky with guitars is that oftentimes for every single point that you have on your original sketch, you'll want to have an equal number of points on the other sketch, right? And that's not always the case, but it makes your life a whole lot easier. So let me show you an example. Now, if I wanted to actually constrain the two lines that we didn't sketch, right? Because right now these are still movable and not defined, I would need to create two other points, right? Somewhere on that circle in order to connect those two. Otherwise, it's going to grab wherever it wants to grab. And that can be a big problem because sometimes if you have a nice smooth curve, sometimes those lines that it's automatically trying to create creates a big harsh crease in your design. And so it's really important to think about, okay, my base shape that I'm coming from has 4 points. I need to, if I want to fully define this, I'm going to need to have 4 points on the next sketch that I'm going to define. So what we can actually do in the case of this circle is add 4 more points, just like we did with the other one. So if I hide the body here, and let's go ahead and hide this sketch, bring these two back, what I can do is do the same thing we did on the other one, plane at angle, on this line, 90 degrees, hit OK. And then we can sketch on that plane, just like we did before, project in the geometry so we have some points to connect to. And now I can go ahead and define those as well. So let's go ahead and do that and like that. And we'll do this one here, this one here. And that's going to be real rough, but you get the idea. So if I go ahead and hit finish, so what I'm saying is I want this point to follow that line, this point to follow that one, this one to follow this one, and this point to follow this line. So it's going to create that shape. So let me delete this loft that we did and let's do a new one. So create loft. I want to loft from this square to this circle, and I want it to follow this line and this line like we did the first time, but now I want it to follow this line and this line. And so now you can see that all 4 are constrained. If I hit OK, you can see that there's still some creases here. So if we wanted it like perfectly smooth, we'd have to then further define those lines. But all 4 points have a defined trajectory, let's say, that I've given it. So how do you apply this to a guitar? As that's really what this comes down to. When we do some of these like recessed cuts on the back of the guitar, right? Let me go to my other design here. I'll show you what I did. So I failed to mention, unfortunately, that you don't just have to extrude. You can also use this to cut that shape into another shape, right? So I'll just do this real quickly. I apologize. So if I wanted to, let's say, cut from a smaller circle, let's say 0.375, to a smaller square. So let's go ahead and hit finish, sketch on this square, and let's do another square, rectangle. There we go. And let's do 1/2 inch, 0.5. Make those equal. Now what I can actually do is loft a cut between those two as well. So I can hit, let's get rid of these other sketches. I want to say I want to loft from this square. So create loft from this profile to that profile. And now you can see it's actually doing the same thing it was before, but it's actually cutting into that shape. And that's where a lot of this in guitar comes into, because what we've done is we've created the body and now we're going to cut out those shapes. So on my design, I did exactly what I showed you here, right? I extruded it to, just a 2D profile, or 3D profile for that matter. And then what I did was I created a triangle shape here. So like from here to here, and I had that cut all the way through, and I used these as lines in order to do that. Here's a better way to show you. I'm rambling a little bit. So if I pull up this loft feature that I used on this, what I did was my first profile was actually over here. It was a triangle from here to here. And then I had another triangle way the hell over here. And what I did was I drew a line on the same plane connecting this point to that point, and this point to that point. And then all I had to do for the bottom one was just project in the line from my original master sketch to a plane at that height. And then I was able to use those as my guide rails. So you can see I went from a triangle, and then each point has to follow this line that I've attached it to. And you hit OK, and you're able to get a relief cut if the computer ever decides to load. All right, I'm back and the computer's loaded. Let's go ahead and try to do that on the body that we've just drawn, and then maybe we'll call it for a day and then move on to episode 3. So let's go ahead and delete our fillet that we did much earlier, and we're going to go ahead and cut the curve that I just showed you, but we'll do it from here to here. So where do you start? So in this case, I would probably actually start by drawing the guide rails first, because then that gives me a definitive point to where I can draw my profile sketches to. So if I go ahead and hit create sketch, and let's sketch on the top plane of this guitar, let's go ahead and project in this top edge, and let's go ahead and draw an arc, let's say from here to here and here to here. Now you could do that and then define like the angles and stuff, but what actually I found can sometimes be really much easier is to take that line you've just projected and come up here and hit offset. Now if you hit offset, what it's going to do is it's going to create you a perfect version of that, but it's going to keep it concentric, all the circles concentric, and it's going to make it smaller so you can see what it's doing here. So what that's going to do for me is if I want that to be like a perfect triangle all the way around, I can just offset that. And if I hit OK, now I've got a dimensioned line that I can then, draw from like, here to here, here to here, and that would give me a nice cutting profile. I didn't do that in my design, but I think that's going to be the easiest way to show you. I did the previous version where I drew a custom arc, so it was a larger radius here and a smaller radius here, etc. So let's go ahead and do it this way. So let's go ahead and hit finish sketch. So now we've already got two of our guide rails. Right here, this one right here, and this one right here. So really what we need is we need our third point. So let's go ahead and construct one more plane, but let's do a mid plane. Right now I'm just going to do this for example. You can make this an offset plane that's, you know, 1/4 an inch below, or you can make it 3/4 of an inch below. I'm just going to do it in the mid for an example. So if I do a mid plane, it's going to create a plane equidistant between these two surfaces. So you can see it's right dead center in the middle. If I hit OK, and now what I can do is I can sketch on that plane. So what I can do now is take that same line that I projected in and project that in to that plane. Right, so all I did was select that line, hit P on the keyboard, enter, and now I've projected that in. So I've already that quickly given myself the guide rails. So if I hide the body, this is the profile I want to connect, right? And so I want to connect between this point, and this point as a sketch, and I want to create a point between these three as a sketch. So you can actually create a plane between 3 points. So if I go and hit construct plane through 3 points, I select this one, and that one, and now I've got a plane to sketch on. And if I come over here and do the same thing, construct plane through 3 points between this one, and that one, I've got a plane to sketch on there. So all I got to do now is sketch on that plane and connect those dots. I clicked the wrong one. Sketch on that plane. And let's go ahead and line from here to here to here to here. Delete that. And what we want to do is make these two coincident and these two coincident. And now it's already fully defined. And so now I'm going to do the same thing over here. Let's go sketch on that plane. And let's create a line. Let's just create 3 points here. That. And go coincident to there. And coincident from here to there. Okay. So now I've basically modeled up what I would like it to chop out of that guitar. So if I bring my body back in, you can see here that I've got that. Basically, my camera's doing some weird things. Hold on. Come on. There we go. Okay. Sometimes it glitches like that a little. So now what I can do is I can do a lofted cut. So if I go create loft, let me hide the body real quick. I want to go from this triangle to that triangle, and I want my guide rails to be this one, and that one. Now it's not wanting me to like that real quick. So you can see it's only giving me 2 right now, and you can see it's trying to like bend it. So let me take off chain selection real quick and see if that fixes it. There we go. Okay. So now that's been fixed. Sometimes what happens is when you have what it considers one line, if it knows that these two are tangent, it's going to try to consider it a single line. But if you don't want to do that and you want to select each individual segment, you can uncheck chain selection and then select each individual segment, and sometimes that fixes the result. If I hit OK, now what I've done is I've cut that triangle all the way through that body. Now, you'll notice if I kind of come up here, you can see a curve there. So what is going on there, right? So if you wanted that to be like a perfect chamfer, that might not be very desirable because now you've got this little like cusp sticking up. And that ties into the point that I made earlier, where sometimes what you need is actually an equal amount of points. So you can see here that I've already got 2 points from my line segments. It would be nice if I had a third that I connected it to. So let's go ahead and go back before we did the loft. And let's see if we can maybe fix that a little bit. So let's go back to this sketch. Nope, wrong sketch. Wrong one again. There we go. Okay. So we need to add a point there. So let's go ahead and go create point on there. That's going to be an easy way to anchor things. So go ahead and hit finish. So now what we want to do is show our sketches like that. And we're going to create another triangle between there, because somewhere in between this triangle and that triangle, it got a little twisted. So the more profiles you add, the more complicated your loft, but also the more accurate your loft will be. So I want to do one more, construct plane through 3 points, like that. Okay, we'll sketch here. Let's go ahead and draw triangle. Make these coincident. That and there. Hit OK. And now let's go back to our loft. So I'm going to drag the slider back, open up my loft. I'm going to delete all of these. We're going to restart this. So we want to go from, hide the body. We want to go from this triangle to this triangle to this triangle. And we want to use this rail, and that rail. Now you can see it's not liking it again, so I'm going to undo chain selection. There you go. It says it's missing this profile between here, so I need to select that one too. And now it's okay. So if I open up my body, hit OK, you can see that that cusp, I have a little bit of it right here, right there, because it's still trying to wrap around that curve. But right at that point where we added it, that cusp is now gone because it's forced into that triangular shape. And so I was able to correct a lot of my mistakes, because for every point that I had in my sketch, I had a line or a profile connecting those. And that's really where lofting becomes kind of tedious, but it's important. So really the big takeaway here is, if you want to do, a more complicated cut through your shape, a loft is a great way to do that. And in fact, we're going to do a lot of lofts as we go through this series. And so I wanted to take a little bit of extra time to explain that. But the key points here is you have sketch 1 and sketch 2, right? At your basic level. I mean, you can have as many in between here as you want, but ultimately you have your start sketch and your end sketch. And if you're going to use guide rails, every one of those rails has to connect from one point to another point on the other sketch. If one is not connecting for any reason, so let's say you tried to connect, you drew your plane slightly off and it actually doesn't touch that point, your loft will fail. So the most important thing is, if you use a guide rail, each line must be connected from one point to another point between the sketches. If they're not actually coincident or connected in any way, your loft will fail. Now, there is so much more I could go into about lofts and the different things you can do with them, but I think this is enough for you to practice, right? So what I would do if I were you is I would, open up a new document and start trying to loft, play around, do some cuts, do some extrusions, get a really good familiar grasp with creating planes and projecting in the lines and making sure they're all connected, so that way you get successful lofts. And when you feel confident with that, come back and check in on episode 3, where we're going to actually take this idea to the next level, and we're going to create some really nice contours on this body. Still, again, leaving this back section alone for now. And then once we get the majority of this body done, we're going to start working on the neck. So I really look forward to you guys coming to the next one. I apologize that this video took so long to get out, but I think it's going to be really rewarding for all of us. And I think I've already learned a lot, even just going back through my old file, because I haven't really touched it in the past couple months. And so I need a refresher too. So thank you very, very much for coming. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate everybody who subscribed in the meantime. that video got way more attention than I thought it would. It may be a measly, you know, 1,200 views, but that meant the world to me because I was expecting like 10 views. So thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.